500 pairs of eyes stared in unshakable shock at the displays hovering above their emperor, and the numbers displayed there bordered on unbelievable. "Sir, you can't possibly be this. These numbers are insane. There's no way we can pull this off on short notice." The voice carries from the middle of the crowd of senators, all trying to comprehend the logistical nightmare laid before them. At the podium, their emperor straightened, gripping the surface tighter, his knuckles going white. "And why, pray tell, is it insane? I have spent the last 3 days with all of my commanders, poring over every detail of this operation. Everything is achievable, and it is doable rapidly." His voice carries across the room, stunned senators slowly regaining their focus as they began to talk quietly, the tension ratcheting up slowly in the room, before one of their number stood up, a tablet in hand. "Sir, by my calculations, it would take every bit of our available heavy lift assets to even begin moving these quantities, much less to do it in any type of a rapid manner." The soft voice echoes, some heads nodding in agreement, as others begin typing rapidly, running their own numbers. "I would normally agree, however, you are discounting a key aspect of the operation that we have already accounted for." He turns, flicking a wrist towards the massive display. Rapidly, details begin to fill in, a solar system materializing, text boxes adding details. This is to be a rapid strike operation, but in multiple steps. The conclave has a major anchorage in place above the planet in question, and while they have labeled it as civilian, it was also the point of departure for the last incursion fleet. My proposal is to treat it as they are using it, not what they call it. Osiris, the horseman, and a screen of the light carriers will form the primary strike arm, along with the assault transports Oni and Behemoth, and 4 of the surface-rated evacuation ships. The room fell so silent it was possible to hear the cycling of the ventilation systems before another of the senators spoke. "You want to send all 4 horsemen? What about their obligations? They are the primary heavy units for each of the protectorate worlds. We don't have anything to replace them with until the next dry dock cycle finishes." The senator turned to their colleagues, gesturing widely. "We have sworn to protect the lives sheltering on those worlds, and we are about to strip a large portion of their defenses for what? Vanity? Revenge? Sir, this is insane." "Insane?" The word hangs dangerously over the room as his heavy brow furrows, rich dark eyes boring back across the intervening space. "Allow me to frame it this way. The Conclave have continued to prosecute the war through indirect means. They have followed the word of the agreement, but not the intent. The last incursion was headed by a full admiral of the Hreth military, aboard one of their rare battleships. The best we can piece together, he was given the ship and crew as a retirement gift. He then used it, and the private armada, to launch an assault on our protectorate. I intend to teach the Conclave the price of their folly." His voice rises louder and louder. "You all asked me to assume this mantle to lead our people. I asked you to hold me accountable. Our enemy has decided to battle, so let us remind them why they signed the peace a year ago. I want the planet to ring like a bell underneath the tread of human boots, under the tread of tanks. It will be a sound that haunts their dreams as their fleet and planet burns." He let his statement hang over the crowd, meeting their eyes one by one before he continues. "I want to end this fight. I want us to live in peace. If those we protect consider us demons and devils for our actions, so be it. I can live with the name, and what we will do for lasting peace. I want this empire to thrive. I want us to have the time and the freedom to find our way home. We cannot do that if they continue to breathe down our necks, poking at our every weakness." He casts his gaze to the upper reaches of the chamber, to the cameras relaying this meeting to every ship and planet within the human empire. "So we will fight. We will show them our last final trick. We will show them the hammer blow instead of the razor. We will but ourselves space and time to mourn, and we will rebuild." He glances down at the podium for a long moment, thinking. "And to that end, it warrants our largest deployment yet. Will you agree to listen to the plan before you condemn it?" He waited. He watched as for several seconds the room was silent, as senators exchanged glances. The silence dragged before a single green light appeared, then another and another, then lighting up by the dozens before all 500 are lit, glowing and brilliant green. He allows himself a small smile. "Then by all means, the plan. Phase 1 starts in the void, our home, not theirs. It begins..." Heketh has been going non-stop for 3 days now. Ever since the raiding fleet had returned battered, broken, and with empty holds, he had been running ragged. He glanced at the strips of wiring hanging from a nearby console, waiting for him to patch and repair them, before letting out a huff of frustration, and using his 4 hands to drag himself from under the captain's station, and allows himself to gaze out over the shipyard through the massive armored windows. The anchorage spread for miles, glittering steel, shining windows, flickering lights, all playing host to what had once been the might and splendor of House Van Lantu's slaving fleet. Now all he saw was shattered hopes and dreams, and the limping shape of a battlecruiser pulling into dock, half of her engines flickering dully, leaving her movements sluggish. He shook his head in disbelief as he let his eyes walk across ship after ship, gouged, broken, some with holes torn clean through. There had been rumors of a conflict on the edges of conclave space. Everyone had heard them, but it hadn't seemed real. Nothing in the galaxy could withstand the might of the conclave, nor did any have the right. Only those invited were superior, were worthy of roving the stars. He cast a glance at the seared mark on his primary hand, the dull emblem of ownership. Someday I'll buy my freedom. A flicker draws his eyes, searching the darkness, as dull, muted flashes of light flicker beyond the shipyard, barely noticeable. He leans forward, tapping on the console as he frowns. The first explosion startles him back, the dull flicker, followed by silence as the approaching battlecruiser shudders, twisting unnaturally before splintering apart, flames tearing at her fleeting atmosphere. Seconds later, the explosions slowly begin to walk along the shipyard, junction after junction violently venting into the void, as the shapes slowly drift into the light cast by the station. Harsh angles and flickering weapons are all that distinguish the ships, aside from their size. 5 gargantuan ships drift forward, their guns flickering in coordination, never striking the same place twice. Their black hulls catch the light dimly, silver symbols etched along their sides, as smaller shapes begin to join them, moving faster, tearing towards the ship sitting cold and dark at the other end of the anchorage. He tears his gaze away, tapping furiously at his communications channel, trying to speak over the dozens of other voices. "Attack! Where are the defenses? Scramble the raiders! They're coming too! Help, please, save—" Faster and faster the voices die out as his own leaves him as the approaching explosions accelerate, ripping apart the waiting ships now, breaking keels and guns. He almost cheers as the first of the defenders begins to fire, certain that the battle will turn, only to see the turret smashed apart after the first wasted shot. More fire begins to pour into the approaching hulls, more positions coming online. He can only watch as the swift, deadly vipers rip through them, hunting each turret, each ship that tries to light their cold reactors. The defenses begin to slack, the withering fire dropping steadily until nothing but stillness reigns, and the attackers continue their slow, inexorable advance. His last thought is of his freedom before the bridge disintegrates around him. We will utilize the jump drive capability to enter close to the anchorage and begin a methodical destruction of the installation and the armada. Osiris and the horsemen shall be the primary force in this engagement, supported by the strike craft of the carriers, as Oni, Behemoth, and the evacuation ships prepare for orbital deployment. The initial targets will be defenses, and any ships currently powered. After that, the station will be destroyed in detail, completely denying its use to the enemy. Above his head the display begins to animate, showing step by step the proposed assault, each step in the elaborate dance. Once the enemy orbital assets are neutralized, we begin the largest orbital deployment we have ever attempted. 15,000 anvil, bulwark, and spearhead troops will hit the ground in coordination, with full tank and mech support, as well as the waiting guns of Oni and Behemoth in low orbit. Once they have established the beachhead, then Vecnith couldn't help but admire the dance taking place above her. The Hreth had no idea what was happening around them, of how rapidly their doom was approaching, but the data sang to him. She cast a glance at the display floating next to him, watching the sky turn red as steel rained from the sky. Thousands upon thousands of their clever, brutal little pods, tearing through the atmosphere, faster than the few guns that were ready could track. The few that did manage to fire were silenced by the waiting vessels above. She couldn't help but smile slightly as she watched the dance play out. A few swift gestures, and her forces began to withdraw from the citadel, formations of automatons moving in perfect synchronity to leave the impending battlefield. Cohort commanders, withdraw all Legion elements. Leave anything that cannot be brought with us. The children of iron are here, and we do not have the might to match them. She watches as her forces withdraw step by step from the encroaching doom. Startled, Hreth defenders stared in horror as her legion withdrew, leaving them alone to face the coming storm. Oh, what a storm it will be! Her soft laughter filled the bunker deep in the mountains as she watched the destruction of one of the oldest slaving conglomerates in the galaxy. This is Hammer 1. Hammer Squad is rolling. All weapon systems are green. Bulwark is digging in now, and the screening forces are forming up. The Citadel walls are in sight, and I'm detecting Zemtic Legion forces withdrawing from the fight. Do we engage or allow them to withdraw? Hammer Unit, the 4 massive tanks, began their slow advance towards the stronghold, their gravity shields flickering faintly as the falling snow interacted with them, their heavy guns whirring softly as they made fine adjustments. Around them, the stomping forms of the spearhead and anvil mechs spread out, their scanners blasting the snowy hills for any signs of life. If the Zemtic forces are withdrawing, allow them to. The moment the open fire crush them, the Emperor wants to send a message. A feral grin splits Hammer 1's face as the tanks begin their steady advance. Understood, Command. Zoriath Flantanu stood quivering with rage as he watched the scum approaching his palace, and as he watched the mercenaries he had hired withdraw without firing a shot. His 4 hands gripped his pistols tighter, seeking a target to vent his rage upon, before the first thundering shot ripped apart his walls, scattering steel and masonry that had stood for thousands of years. His rage vanished as his legs turned liquid. Prepare my shuttle. I am leaving. He turned, striding for safety. We know the Citadel houses a massive holding area for newly captured or newly purchased slaves. To that end, there will be no heavy weapons brought to bear against the central palace itself. The outer walls will be destroyed by the heavy tanks, as mechs and infantry advance to secure the interior. This is the most dangerous part of the mission, and it is why it will be headed up by the augmented regiment, with other forces acting as supporting elements. The Emperor continued, step by step, watching the dawning comprehension on the senators' faces. We will deliver a hammer blow to one of the pillars of the conclave, and remind them what forced the peace in the first place. His smile was the thing of nightmares, and in each of the senators' eyes he saw its mirror. The damned gates wouldn't stay closed, the turrets wouldn't function. Nothing was going right for Meltani as he tried to stuff another power cell in his rifle. Each time he had triggered a door, he watched one of the humans reach out, touch it, and with mounting horror he would watch the door slide back open. He had watched them touch a wall, and in response the lights would fail. Nothing stopped them, nothing slowed them. His rifle only seemed to annoy them, as an angry red mark would appear, before fading away as if he had never shot them. The rest of the jailers were dead. He knew that. Had listened as the thunder of their weapons had physically ripped apart his comrades. He had watched one even use a sword, a weapon so old he had never seen one, to cleave his commander in two. Now it was just him, hiding in a corner in a slowly growing puddle, slowly praying as he rocked back and forth. His mother had told him of demons, of how they could come for you. That's what this was. They had angered demons, and now he had to pay the price. Osiris glanced at the time display on the bridge, before settling his eyes back on the captain. 5 hours from deployment to withdrawal. A clean operation, and not a bit of evidence. He hummed softly, the synthesized sound echoing from the speakers in the display. I look forward to seeing how the conclave reacts. They never fail to disappoint. Let's head home, Osiris. I want to see my daughter tonight. The captain's tired voice is all the prompting needed. A shallow nod, and the small fleet vanishes from existence in a soft flash of light. All in favor of executing this punitive action, vote now. All eyes watched as the system tallied the votes, ran the numbers, and finally displayed them for all to see. 450 ayes, 30 nays, 20 abstain. The Emperor gives a shallow nod and straightens. Muster the fleet. We depart in 3 days. The sunlight burned their eyes, so used to the dank and the dark. They watched their rescuers closely, shocked as they moved among them, speaking softly with each one. Beyond the clusters of liberated refugees, the distant thunder raged on, as the hulking, black-clad figures moved ever onwards. The open maw of the waiting ship beckoned softly as streaks of fire crossed the sky. Never before had they thought this possible. Even now it felt like a fever dream, something they were unworthy of. And yet, freedom. Peace. They sighed softly at the thought and began to walk slowly, stiffly towards the waiting ship and a new life.